Hey guys, hope you're having a lovely, lovely morning. I wanted to quickly share a couple of tips that are designed to help you project a greater sense of confidence during job interviews. That's something that I hear all the time from clients, and believe me, that goes as much for the executive clients that I work with as middle management and anybody else. They tell me that they're out there, they're submitting their resume, they're doing all the right things, and they're getting interviews, and yet when they're in there, they just feel like at that point when they're face to face with someone, that's when they lose all sense of control. They feel that they're just stuck there, just sort of another applicant doing what they're supposed to do, answering the right questions, and not really knowing whether it's working, whether it's not, and basically they feel like they have no leverage. So that's what I want to quickly address here. And I'm going to give you a couple of quick tips to sort of support that. See, the major mistake that people make in the job search is thinking that if I come in as a good employee, if I show them that I'm a go-getter who's willing to do whatever it takes, then that's what's going to land me the job. And the truth is, even though employers might think or tell you that that's what they want, that is not the mentality that is going to give you the most leverage, because it's just human nature that when you have someone who's saying, oh, I'll do anything, I'll say anything, I'll accept as many interviews and do anything that you want me to do to get the job, that's not appealing. That doesn't make us want someone. Now, instead of that mentality, think about this. Think about someone who comes in from a mentality of, I am highly, highly skilled. I am highly, highly in demand. Yes, you guys are a company that I'm interested in. There's several other companies that I'm interested in. And I need to find a fit for myself as much as you need to find the right candidate. So why don't we see and have an honest conversation about whether that's going to work for us? Now, doesn't that sound more appealing? Doesn't that feel like that would give you more in the way of results? That's the mentality that you want to really be thinking about, because it's that mindset that is going to give you results. So that's all fine and good, right? And that's all nice and philosophical. But what are some actions, some concrete actions that you can take to sort of support that? Here is a couple of easy tips that you can take. All right, it's going to take a little bit of courage, but I promise you it's going to pay off, and you're not going to alienate anyone by doing it either. So tip number one, first one, straight off the bat, set and maintain clear time limits for every single interview, phone interview, what have you. In other words, someone calls out to you, reaches out to you and says, hey, I need to schedule a 15-minute call with you, just an intro call to see whether you'd be a good fit and whether you should advance. Great. Accept that 15-minute call, and prior to that call, set a timer on your phone, on your clock, whatever, for 15 minutes. And when that 15 minutes is up, I don't care where you guys are at, say, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. We're out of time at this point. I'd love to continue this further, if you do, of course, and let me know. Same thing for an interview. If you accept a 1-hour interview or an hour-and-a-half interview, then you need to be absolutely ruthless about maintaining that time limit. Because when you start giving up free time, it sends a very, very clear message to an employer that they have the leverage. They have the power, you're willing to do whatever it takes, and they can sort of run roughshod over you through the interview process. That's not what you want. So that's tip number one. Set and maintain very, very clear time limits. So tip number two is kind of taking this one step further, and that is this. Again, a big complaint people have. They're stuck in interview number 2, 3, 4, 5. They don't know where it's going to go, but they feel that they're getting close and they don't want to let it go. So here's tip number 2. Don't agree to further interviews after, let's say, the initial face-to-face without getting feedback from them, concrete feedback, about where they are in the hiring process. In other words, so you've had that face-to-face interview, it went well, you get a call saying, hey, we want to bring you in again. Before you say yes, say this. That's great. I'm really excited about it. I feel like we've got a great thing going here. But before I agree to that, can you let me know exactly how close are you guys in the hiring process? How many other people are you considering? How close am I? And what specifically should I be preparing for in this interview? In other words, what do you want to achieve from this? You need to get that feedback from an employer before you, again, invest more of your valuable time on a further interview. This is really, really crucial, okay? They need to know that you're not someone who's going to just roll over and accept anything that comes their way. So any further interviews that come in the door have got to be accompanied by clear insights from the employer about where they are in the hiring process, how close they're getting to selecting a candidate, and what specifically they want to be focusing on in that new interview. If they can't give you those answers, they're either jerking you around or they don't have a clear idea of what they want, and you're going and taking the time to prepare another interview and taking time out of your day to do it isn't going to move the ball forward anyway. So you're not losing anything. So again, that's very, very crucial, okay? For any follow-up interviews, you've got to get that feedback in terms of where they are. Finally, the last one, and this really plays into when you're in the interview itself, is flip the script on any potential negative questions. Listen, you are not under any obligation to answer every question that an employer asks. That's not part of the deal, okay? If they ask you questions that are sensitive, if they ask you questions that touch on confidential information, if they ask you questions that really there's no way that you can answer to help further establish your credibility or your expertise, then you need to just flip the script. In other words, either it's a polite and elegant way to dismiss the question. And this works in almost any situation. Here's example number one, okay, for a little one. Question I hate, a question that does nothing, is what's your greatest weakness? Now, kind of an inappropriate question, no? I mean, would you ask that of a coworker? Would you ask it of them? Rather than taking that seriously, okay, and answering that seriously, there's no way that that's going to help you, right? I would recommend flipping it. Either you say something like, along the lines of, one of the best ones I've heard is, what's your greatest weakness? Someone answered chocolate. And that got a laugh, and that diffused the tension, and it also communicated confidence, right? Because it said, hey, that's not what I'm about. I'm not going to just answer everything. You're free to ask it, but I'm not going to be asking that. Another thing that you can do in terms of directly flipping the switch is, I'd love to answer that question, that sensitive question, but I would like you to answer that one first, and then I'm going to give you something as well. Again, guaranteed they're not going to answer that question because it's a ridiculous question and it doesn't bear answering. So for small things like that, you can always flip it like that. Flip it off with a jokey answer or something funny or something that says, that's not really something I feel comfortable asking, but what I would like to talk about is X, Y, and Z. That's one. The other way that you can flip the script is for more serious questions. And how you do that is, for example, a big one, companies will ask you very, very early on in the process, how much money do you want to make? And, what did you make at your former employer? Now, that question is really off base. First of all, it's confidential. That's not information that anyone is obligated to share. And secondly, let's be real, okay? If they're asking you that question early on in the game, the only reason they want to know that is to preemptively drive down what their offer is going to be in the event that they make you one. Because in our day and age, with sites like Glassdoor, with all of these other resources that are in hand, anyone can get a pretty clear ballpark figure in terms of what you made at your previous job without you having to volunteer that information. So the reason that they're asking it to you early is to drive the cost down. So it's a negative question. It's a question that is not going to help your case by answering. So knowing that, here's what I would do. Here's an elegant way to flip that question. They say, what did you make at your last salary? At your last position? What I would say is, the details of what I made at my last job is confidential, just like the details of what you make at this job is confidential. So I don't feel comfortable sharing that. But as long as we're on the topic of salary, can you give me a sense of what the expected salary range is for this position based on the amount of expertise and experience that I'm bringing to the table? So you flip the question, you don't alienate anyone, you project confidence by sending a clear message that yes, there's things I'm going to answer and there's things that I'm not going to answer. I know my worth, and I'm not going to answer things that are going to devalue that. And you keep things friendly. So these are the 3 tips that I have for you. And if you integrate these 3 tips, they're really going to make a big difference. So what are they again? 1, maintain clear time limits for every stage of the interview process. 15-minute call lasts 15 minutes. Hour-long interview lasts at 1 hour. Exactly. Don't let it stretch. Number 2, don't agree to follow-up interviews without getting concrete feedback from an employer about exactly where they are in the hiring process. In terms how close are they, what do they hope to achieve with a follow-up interview, and again, you can frame that from a point of view of I want to prepare better for that follow-up interview, so that's why I need this concrete feedback from you. But don't just agree to follow-up interviews without getting that concrete information, because otherwise it's just going to be a waste of time. And then thirdly, flip the script on negative questions. Remember, you don't have to answer everything. You certainly don't have to answer questions that don't meaningfully advance your status, your sense of credibility and expertise. And there's ways that you can flip that off. Either you flip it off as a joke, or you flip it off in terms of saying, look, I don't feel comfortable answering that question, but why don't you tell me something about that, and then we can continue onwards. So these are my 3 tips. I hope that they've been a big help to you. Integrate them. You will certainly see an improvement in terms of how you're perceived in the marketplace, and certainly how you're perceived by employers. And just remember, all of this is really about one thing. Remember your value. Remember your unique worth. Remember what you're bringing to the table, and never, ever, ever feel like you're just one of many. You are not. You are unique. What you are is unique, and fight for a position and a company that absolutely respects that. Thank you again for listening to this, for learning with me, and I'll see you on the flip side. Thanks again.